Putaringa Motu, the place of an echo.
Yeah, it is a special place. I mean, most national parks are, but this is such a tiny forest remnant right in the middle of the city. You've got bellbirds singing, pigeons, native pigeons, fantails flitting around, a grey warbler singing. You really don't realise you're right in the middle of Christchurch, and I'm sure a lot of people don't really know that this place is here.
Riccarton Bush, a remnant of a time gone by. Now this green high-rise stands surrounded by suburbia. John Moore takes care of this sole survivor.
It's a pleasure to work here a lot of the time, and I do consider myself quite lucky to have a job in the middle of the city where I can be amongst nature like this and be looking after such a lovely place.
There was a time when Canterbury was native green, from the Alps to the ocean. This is the last bit of kahikatea forest left standing.
When the first humans arrived in New Zealand maybe 700 to 800 years ago, New Zealand was predominantly a forested country, and so the vegetation across the Canterbury Plains would have been as it had been for a couple thousand years before that. With the arrival of the ancestors of the Māori people, we had quite extensive fire. We had massive fires, in fact fires of an intensity and an extent that we can't even imagine today. And much of the eastern South Island was burnt probably 600 to 700 years ago. Riccarton Bush of course survived, not all of it, but this core area survived. The Dean set it aside and protected it, and it's been here right through to the present day.
Among the earliest settlers, John and William Deans made Riccarton their home in the early 1840s, seeing the bush as a valuable resource.
I think they looked at it probably from a practical perspective, probably more as shelter and also the ability to get timber out of it, but they also had a deep affinity and a love of flora and fauna. They could be accused of being the earliest greenies. On my great-great-grandfather's deathbed, he decided and asked his wife Jane to that no more trees would be cut down. So that was the start of the preservation of Riccarton Bush.
I think the only reason it did survive is that the Deans were people who appreciated trees. If it had been a different farming family that set up farming close to the bush, they would have cut it down pretty quickly. And most people in those days would have done that, I'd say. But the Deans appreciated trees, and we're just very lucky that they protected it until 1914, when they gifted it to the people of Canterbury. Well, this is the biggest tree in here. This is a giant kahikatea tree. And this is the biggest in Riccarton Bush in girth, and probably the oldest. We don't really know that, but we're pretty sure it would be well over 600 years old. Within Riccarton Bush there's something like 475 adult kahikatea trees.
It takes centuries for trees to reach the canopy, but they all start small.
Okay, well we're still planting in this part of the bush because it's still quite open. We're down in the southeast corner, and as you can see it's quite light and quite a lot of grass, so we're hoping to be able to close this in. So I'm just putting a kahikatea tree in here, which I've got prepared, so I'll just spoon that out. Well, this is a tree that was grown in the Riccarton Bush nursery, and this was grown from seed taken from one of the big kahikatea trees. We don't plant anything in here unless it's been grown from seed from a tree within Riccarton Bush. We don't collect seed outside of the area. So I'm just going to put that in here. Right, there we go.
Ancient, yes. Immortal, no. And big or small, all native forests face challenges.
This fence is designed to keep out any introduced animals, cats, stoats, rats, possums, and unfortunately in New Zealand today, those introduced species are decimating our native fauna. And having predator-proof fences, having intensive pest control is the only way to maintain those species in New Zealand. So a place like Riccarton Bush can be really good for educating people about those sorts of impacts. By having the predator-proof fence, Riccarton Bush is free of those animals.
We shouldn't have any predators in here at all because they can't get over the fence, but there is a possibility that something may just get in. The animal most likely to do that is the rat or the mouse, and we don't definitely don't want either of those in here. So the way that we monitor to make sure that there are no rats or mice in here is to have permanent bait stations out, and we check them weekly. And inside there we've got a piece of bait. It's not poison, it's just bait. When we check it, we see that it's been taken or it's been nibbled. We'll put some poison in here, we'll put it back. They'll always come back to the same place for food. So they come back, they eat the poison and it gets them.
While predators are few and far between, the birds are flourishing.
There's some grey warbler, hear that? It's a little native grey warbler. And aircraft.
Getting the bush back as it was isn't easy, but their hard work is more than paying off.
Okay, well this is a little habitat within a habitat of Riccarton Bush. This is a little area that is quite shady and damp, and this aerial moss thrives in this situation. You can pick it up in handfuls and it gets its nourishment from the moisture of the air. When we put kiwi in here, I brought some logs in. I'd sort of thought, well, make it nice and comfortable for them, so I put the moss, the aerial moss, in the bottom on the ground of the log, put some ferns over the log, made it sort of a 5-star Kiwi motel.
Through centuries of hardship, the place of an echo has endured, protected by those who went before, a treasure for those who are still to come.
The way it survived is really quite unusual, that a place this small in the middle of a city could survive, but survive it has.
This is the last remnant. It's only a tiny portion of what would have been here once upon a time. So it's our duty really is to ensure that it stays for posterity.
Oh look, it's a chance to, in the middle of a city, to come in and see a bit of original, natural New Zealand forest. And it's a beautiful bit of forest. Yes, we can hear Riccarton Road out there, but I mean, you can be sitting in the middle of the bush here, you can hear the bellbirds singing, you can hear the grey warbler calling, and it's just a nice little place to remind yourself about those things that are important to us, really. Yeah.
I consider I'm looking after the most valuable property in Riccarton. Most people would dispute that and say probably Riccarton Mall is the most valuable property, but if Riccarton Mall burnt down, you could replace it, but if Riccarton Bush burnt down, it's gone forever, because this is the last piece of native forest of its type left in Canterbury.